In his treatise Rhetoric, the Greek philosopher Aristotle lists 9 forms of virtue as a guide for providing and preserving good things: justice, courage, temperance, magnificence, magnanimity, liberality, gentleness, prudence, and wisdom. But in the bigger picture, rhetoric serves as an exposition on the art of persuasion. In doing so, we shall at the same time be finding out how to make our hearers take the required view of our own characters, our second method of persuasion, he writes. The ways in which to make them trust the goodness of other people are also the ways in which to make them trust our own. These principles from the 4th century BCE lay the groundwork for a modern phenomenon emerging from post-consumerism culture after World War II: branding. Following World War II, there were several concrete shifts that took place in the United States. Firstly, the economy recovered quickly against expectations, creating an environment where people could spend money freely. Despite concerns that the U.S. would be unable to transition workers who made tanks and planes to making consumer goods, most workers were able to find jobs quickly. Between the beginning of 1945, at the climax of the war, and the beginning of 1946, when the war had ended, unemployment rose only 3%, from 1% in 1945 to 4% in 1946. For context, the natural unemployment rate in the United States is around 4.1 to 4.3%. That means that the 4% unemployment in 1946 meant that the economy had already recovered back to normal. Secondly, the end of World War II meant the end of the war's presence in people's homes and personal lives. With wartime rationing policies from 1942 to 1945 suddenly repealed after the war, people were eager to spend their money. One of the first industries to meet this desire was the automobile industry.
In this corner, Miss Ann Hart. Weight, 98 pounds. And in this corner, and we really mean cornered, is her 1956 Ford. Weight, 3,600 pounds. Now watch how easily she makes this ton-and-a-half car do what she wants it to do.
By the end of the 1950s, around 75% of Americans owned at least one car. Along with the liberty to buy desired goods once again, the end of rationing meant that Americans were allowed their full freedom, from an ideological perspective as well. Historian Gary Cross writes, "Commodities gave people a sense of freedom, the means to establish new personal identities and to break with old ones without necessarily abandoning family, friends, and the common culture." These changes meant that Americans were poised to not only become voracious consumers, but consumers that saw individualism through the goods they purchased. People wanted goods that not only served a function, but also added to their identity, giving rise to pathos marketing. The need for marketing and branding is inherently tied with commodities. The word brand has its origins in Old English, meaning burning, referring to the practice starting in the 15th century of burning a symbol into cattle or even slaves to signal ownership. Branding evolved from a mark of ownership to a representation of identity following the Industrial Revolution, where improved manufacturing processes meant mass production and an influx of differentiated products. Companies started having to show how their product was better than others in order for their product to stand out. However, it was only after World War II that a true consumerist culture, where success and well-being were tied to the ability to acquire goods, emerged. Let's look at modern cars again. Each company's logo, instantly recognizable and distinguished from the rest, has evolved to reflect the company, its products, and its values as a whole. Logos are just one part of a company's brand and marketing strategy. Mission statements, advertising campaigns, and images associated with brands mean that as a consumer of a product, one aligns themselves with the values associated with that product or brand. Values are something that makes one producer stand out from others, and they appeal to the pathos of consumers. I care about the environment, one might say, so I use Dawn soap, even though that user of Dawn might have no idea how their purchase directly helps the environment. Or I want to have a good time, like the people in that advertisement, so I'm going to drink Coca-Cola. But Coke drinkers aren't promised a good time. But it's the virtues connected with these products that speak to a need beyond practicality, where the products that consumers buy today are connected to their identity. The need for differentiation between product A and product B was what first drove companies to develop virtuous marketing strategies. Today, an emerging area where that need is coming out is in higher education. Australian business researchers Balaji, Roy, and Sadek identified that higher education institutions are facing challenges of competitive pressures, shrinking financial support from governments, decline in university-going population, and widespread changes in an educational environment, leading them to increasingly adopt marketing and branding strategies that are typically associated with the for-profit sector. The oldest universities in the United States are lucky enough to have decades, if not centuries, of history and culture to reshape into a marketing identity. One such university that falls into this category is UNC Chapel Hill.
UNC, as the oldest public institution in the U.S., already has one of the strongest identities in higher education. From Carolina Blue, the Old Well, student traditions, to Jordan, women's soccer, and Nobel laureates, UNC has an identity rooted in excellence. With this excellence, the University Communications and Marketing Department was established to engage key audiences with the university's story of excellence in research and innovation, access and affordability, academics, the student experience, and our service to North Carolina. In particular, they have started a new campaign that recently released this fall. And this campaign is UNC First and For All. We spoke to students about what they thought this new slogan meant.
First and for all to me means that everyone is having the same opportunities, the same ability to succeed.
Keeping students the focus, making sure everyone has equitable opportunities to thrive here at Carolina.
It's like a community, it's like a huge family.
That is the new slogan, First and For All. Signals that UNC is a space of belonging and inclusivity for all. However, this is not the case for the 3.1% of students, as reported by the UNC SERU in 2024, that have a physical disability that affect the way that they interact with the UNC campus. Talking with Dr. Kim Weed, who researches disability studies here at UNC, and Shruti, a member of the disability community and a disability advocate, they both argued that changes here on the UNC campus for those with disabilities primarily came from student initiative and student action. Changes to the UNC campus, such as adding a ramp to the Old Well, which is a core part of UNC's identity, have been made. While UNC has made some changes in increasing the accessibility for people with physical disabilities on campus, there still remains many problems, such as common elevator outages and buildings such as this Haynes Art Center still having no accessible restrooms, which forced Carolina alum Sarah Ferguson to change her degree. Since UNC is not completely accessible and inviting to this 3.1% of the student population, by counterexample, it is not first and for all. Rather, this is a virtue signal. Virtue signaling, as defined by the Cambridge Dictionary, is an attempt to show other people that you are a good person, indicating that one has virtue merely by expressing disgust or favor for certain political ideas or cultural happenings. This term was popularized in 2015 by British journalist James Bartholomew in his article, The Awful Rise of Virtue Signaling. And here is James describing what virtue signaling is.
These days, many people think that merely expressing an opinion establishes that they really care. They use wristbands, hashtags, tweets, ribbons and t-shirts to show they have fashionably right-on opinions. I call this phenomenon virtue signaling. It's the idea that having and expressing a particular opinion makes you morally superior.
So, by definition, UNC's new slogan, First and For All, is virtue signaling, because UNC is conveying that they're a space of inclusivity and belonging for all, when this is not the case. Instead, They're claiming this as to get the moral high ground, and that will get them the best approval. I mean, it wouldn't be a good look for UNC if they were to say that they weren't really for people with physical disabilities.
It doesn't require actually
James
doing
Bartholomew
it.
argues
Requires
that the
political
problem
effort,
with
no
virtue
sacrifice.
signaling is that
Virtue signalling without actually doing anything is not true virtue. It is self-righteous, vain, and silly. I suppose the reason that all this virtue signalling really irritates me is that there are still people who are truly virtuous.
while UNC's First and For All slogan is virtue signaling, it is not this hollow, self-righteous, vain, and silly kind of virtue signaling that James Bartholomew describes. For example, the First and For All campaign highlights the economic impact that UNC has on North Carolina. From the Covenant Scholars, which increases the accessibility of a college degree for low-income students, to research with impact in serving North Carolina, UNC is taking action towards First and For All. After all, as James puts it,
It's not what you say or think that matters, it's what you do.